Hey, welcome back to Duckman Cycles at VW Garage. I'm your host, the Duckman. We're back today with my 1956 Beetle, also known as Eleanor, and today we're going to discuss something that actually probably would be better covered in a Q&A, but because we're doing some technical stuff in this, it's actually going to be handled over here on this channel. What we're going to talk about today, and what we're going to do, is we're going to measure the camber on the rear wheels. And if you're not familiar with the term camber, it's the ability of the wheels to stay straight up and down. Ignore the magic pinky, but straight up and down. And negative camber is when they tip inwards, and positive camber, of course, when they tip outwards like that. Now, depending upon the setup of your vehicle, you may or may not have those adjustments. We're going to talk about a little bit about that and about the 944 Porsche rear suspension that I put onto the rear end of my Beetle here, and how this is going to work, and also later as some of the comments that people have made, either saying that I've had this tremendous amount of negative camber and that something is wrong, or that I have such good camber compared to other Beetles that they've seen. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today and take some measurements, and just for good measure, we're also going to throw the 350Z here into the mix also and measure the rear camber on her. And you know what? The Z never got a name. I suppose we're going to have to name her someday. We'll be thinking about that. Down below in the comments, if you got name suggestions for the blue 350Z, let me know. She's been with me a long time. She's been a workhorse, and she's been my Volkswagen tow truck. Anyways, you guys, thanks for watching. Really do appreciate it. Like, comment, subscribe, pluck that little dingle belly, and right after the intro, we're going to come back, and we're going to take some measurements. Thanks for watching. We'll be back. Okay, looking at the rear wheels here on my Beetle, you'll probably notice right away, it looks like they are not only towed in, but it also looks like they're cambered. The reason for the tow in is actually because I have a fisheye lens on here and it causes things to kind of bubble a little bit. But you will notice the tops are turned in a little bit, and that is normal. You do want to have a little bit of negative camber on the rear end of your car. Just about every car needs it. And the reason is because, effectively, that rear wheel needs to dig into the pavement when you're turning left. So you want it to dig in that way. Of course, you don't want it to point the other way and skate across the pavement and cause you to spin out. You actually want it to bite a little bit. And one of the reasons why, when the suspension compresses, the wheels camber even more. That is normal behavior. And again, while you're turning and you're making that left-hand turn and the right-hand side of the vehicle wallows, that suspension will wallow. That's kind of a negative word, but yeah, the suspension will actually wallow a little bit on the outside rear wheel. And that's normal. You want the camber to go in, it'll bite. Effectively, what that means is your rear wheels are helping you to steer. And it's important that they do that. Now, the camber measurement of a 944 in the rear is approximately 2 degrees is where you're looking at. This is what I've been told by a lot of the racer guys. Some guys go up to 3 degrees and maybe even just a hair more than that. Of course, they do have some toe-in settings and stuff, but that's not what we're talking about today. We're actually going to be discussing camber. Now, we're going to take some measurements on this and figure out exactly how much camber we have on here and how it's going to affect the steering of the vehicle. Now, of course, there's been no alignment that's been done on this thing yet. It's just whatever settings that I've set it to. So let's see approximately how close we are at the stock height that we're looking at right now. Okay, to measure the rear camber of the wheel, if all things were universal in this world and all things were accurate and straight, such as my driveway was completely level, I could, of course, take an angle gauge like this, put it on the end here, and take a measurement. But because my driveway is not level, and I knew the driveway does actually slope this way, and I don't know to what degrees, I've never measured it, I don't care, we're actually going to measure how far the wheel is turned from the flat concrete. And that's actually the camber measurement that we're going to be taking from here. There's a much better way to do it, and it's going to involve a lot of that math that you learned in school. Well, that you were expected to learn anyway. I know I blew off the teacher. I barely passed some of those classes. But some of the stuff in geometry that actually is going to apply here. I'm not going to be doing so much with the calculations. There's actually a calculator that's designed for that. I understand some of the basic theories and principles as to how to get an angle from a triangle, which is what we're going to be drawing out here. And how we're going to handle that is with a square. Simple as it is. We're going to lay it right here on the pavement, so that way it's flat running across the bottom. And we're going to stand it straight up and down. And we now know 3 important measurements. We can figure out the length from wherever it is that I measure it to the ground. We can figure out the distance from here to the sidewall of the tire. And one of the measurements that's given is that this angle up here is going to be 90 degrees. So it'll be a right angle triangle. So we can figure out what the angle here is on the bottom, and that will be our camber angle. Now the reason why I'm laying it against the sidewall, there's really no good flat surface on the front of the wheel. As you probably see here, the wheel does not stick out quite as far as the sidewall of the tires does. So I can't put an accurate measurement from here and run straight to the ground. Now the tires may have a little bit of imperfections on it. You know, they may be a little wobbly. Maybe the bottom is bulging a little more than the top. But we're going to make approximate assertions based on what we're looking at here, do the math, and see what kind of figures that we come out to. Let's take this sucker here, put it where we want it, make sure it's square to the ground. And I'm trying to measure as close as I can get to the center of the wheel. And I also want to run it as straight up and down as I can. I should get it right there. I'm going to measure from the sidewall. And we're looking at right about 7/8 of an inch at 22.5 inches. So let's take those two measurements down there and record those. We're going to do the math on those in a minute. Alright, and here's a 350Z, or Z as they say in many other places in the world. She's been with me since 2005 and she is dirty, 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 dirty. She's certainly seen better days. But down here below, we've got our tool set up, and we're going to be taking the same measurements that we did up on the Beetle suspension on the Z. Now this car hasn't had an alignment on it in, oh geez, I don't know when. It's been a long time since I've aligned the tires on here. I don't have any problems with weird tire wear. Typically the Z's do wear on the inside more than they do on the outside because they do have a bit of an extreme camber, but being that they are a sports car, it's not too big of a surprise. It's just, you know, that's part of the beast. Anyways, let's get down here and take some measurements. Okay, putting our square once again. Wow, that's a hell of a gouge I put in that wheel. Wonder when I did that. Alright, once again, there's no good flat surface on this wheel to use an angle gauge, so I've got to do it this way. Put it right against the sidewall on the bottom, align it with the middle, and let's take our measurement at the top, right up to that sidewall. Come on now, square up, there we go. Okay, we're right at 23.5 inches. And let's see if I can get a better angle here to look at this. We're looking at, are we square? No, we're not square. Get in there. There it is. Looks like it's about 11/16. 23.5. The first things we need to do now that we've got our data is to go ahead and pull up a proper calculator. Go ahead and go to a triangle calculator. This is a really good one from calculator.net. It's got some values filled into it that we're just going to clear out because we don't need them. Now you notice a triangle is, well, it's kind of knocked over on its side about 120 degrees. But we're going to imagine B being the angle that was up at the top. So if this were the triangle here, and I'm kind of visualizing it here by drawing a triangle, right up here would be our right angle. So we're going to make B our right angle, so that like this whole thing is just knocked over on its side. Alright, that would be 90 degrees. Our angle A was the distance between the tire and the square, and that was 7/8 of an inch, so 875. And our height was 22.5 inches. And this is all done in units. Simple as that. So let's go ahead and calculate. So our results for the 944 suspension that we're looking at here has a camber of about 2¼ degrees, negative camber. Now that's pretty close to how I was suggested to do it. Most of the people were telling me I want between 2 and 2½ degrees for a proper streetable yet performance-driven vehicle. So I would say that probably where we've got it is pretty close to good, because remember, we're going to lower it a little bit, so that adjustment's actually going to increase in camber some. So it might go up to 2.5 or even closer to 3. Anything over 3, I was told, is certainly for racing, so that's not something we're going to want to go beyond. So I think we're pretty good in that department. We are going to have to set the rear toe, so the camber may be affected by that. And once that gets set, that'll be done by the alignment shop. I won't be dealing with that. But I think we should be happy after that. But yeah, we're pretty close to within spec. So anybody that said that my camber looked like it was goofy or way too far, It wasn't. For those of you that said that they look pretty straight up and down, you guys were pretty right. So yeah, the math turned out good. Let's go ahead and check out on the Z, 'cause the Z is quite a curiosity. Now the camber on the Z, as I looked it up, is supposed to be between negative camber of 1.1 to negative 2.1 degrees. So we're going to first put on our constant angle, which we know for sure is the 90. And then our side C will be 23.5. And then our side A, which is the distance between the sidewall of the tire and the square, is 11/16ths of an inch. In thousandths of an inch, well actually I guess it's 10,000ths of an inch, it will be 0.6875. And then we'll calculate our angle down below here. And there we have it. Our camber setting is 1.676, which is well within spec. This, of course, is a negative figure because it's calculating how far that wheel is leaned over into a negative stance. Spec on a Z is negative 1.1 to negative 2.1, and anywhere in between there is considered accurate and properly aligned. So this is actually a good setting. It's kind of, not really halfway in between. It's kind of halfway in between, actually. Yeah, it's you know what? It's right on the money, halfway in between. Anyways, this was done more of a curiosity than anything else. It's kind of interesting to me that the alignment, specifically the camber, is just as close on the Z as it is on the 944. That the numbers are kind of similar, but again, both of those cars were tuned for sport driving. It didn't answer any curiosities that I had anyway, so let's go ahead and step back outside. Now this right here is Eleanor's original chassis. You can see below that it is swing axle, and this is what all Beetles had from 68 and down, unless you were managing to get a 1968 auto stick. Those actually did have an IRS rear suspension. But you notice the rear suspension is real simple. It's got a spring plate here on the end, which is that real thin piece of metal. It will flex this way. It actually is designed to twist. The torsion bar is what allows it to go up and down just like that. But that axle you see on here is single jointed. There's a joint on the side where the transmission is, and that's the only one. So when that whole axle moves, that wheel, as a result, will do this. It'll actually twist on that spring plate. The design is really simple, and there's no camber adjustment at all. The only rear adjustment you've got is your toe-in. The 3 bolts that are here on the end, 1, 2, 3, you can actually loosen those, and you can move that wheel forward and back just enough to get your alignment set for the rear. But that's really all you get when it comes to the swing axle rear suspension. Now, if you notice, it's got extreme positive camber right now because there's no weight on it. It's got no wheels on it. Everything kind of is just goofed up that you see right here. So this is not how it would normally sit. Normally those axles would be damn near straight out from the transmission. And once you lower it, of course, you get an extreme negative camber. The wheels will lean in. And the only way to straighten that, and people have told me some really wacky stuff, but the only way you can properly align that without changing out a ton of parts is by raising your transmission and engine up. Because what that will do is change the angle of the swing axle, cause it to push the wheel back out. But in the case of Eleanor's more modern IRS suspension, we got to belay all of this, and we're not using any of it. Well, for some reason I did something dumb here. All this brand new equipment, I didn't turn the microphone on, so I'm going to try to narrate my way through it. But right here we have our rear suspension from a late model Beetle, and you're noticing it has rear trailing arms and double jointed axles that you can see right there, which the earlier swing axle Beetles do not have. They allow the wheel to pivot independently of that axle rather than being perfectly perpendicular like a swing axle would be ordinarily. The purpose for that is to actually allow the camber of the wheel to only adjust slightly rather than having the dramatic camber effect that you have on a standard swing axle. Now you notice that pivot point that's there is on a slight diagonal rather than being perfectly straight, and that allows the wheel to swing away, or I should say swing inwards for the cambering effect that it has when you make a turn. You can adjust the rear camber on this setup with this 944 rear setup that I have here by adjusting some of these bolts that you see. Now there's a whole bunch of different bolts, and you wouldn't ordinarily find these two on an IRS Beetle because they actually are for adjusting the height. But these 3 that you see back here are the ones that you're going to loosen up to adjust your camber and your toe-in. Now I have this special little tool here. This is unique for 944s, and I believe some 911s use it as well. This allows you to set that alignment or toe-in effect. It slides right here into the trailing arm and then slides into the spring plate on the opposite side. And you notice that hole is slotted. And when you turn that little tool, it actually causes the alignment of the toe-in to work itself forward and back just by simply turning that bolt. There's another bolt that's in there. It's attached to the sway bar right now, and that has a bolt on the back side of it, and it's also cammed just like the tool is, so that way it allows you to adjust your camber by just turning the bolt simply enough. It's really stupid simple how all this works, but I mean, this is the IRS Volkswagen suspension 2.0. I mean, this was the successor to that which was the IRS Beetle. And that's why this stuff looks as different as it is because I've upgraded it to all the Porsche parts. Ordinarily you wouldn't find these parts on a Beetle, but having them give me a lot more adjustment, and also added the additional track width that Eleanor needed due to the wide fenders. Alright, you can see that trailing arm that's going this way, that aluminum piece. That's the 944 stuff that I put on compared to a stock trailing arm. This is actually what came off of this car. We're going to demonstrate how this works and how there's no adjustments on it to adjust the camber. Alright, I don't know if you heard it again, but just as I was shutting down the camera, I got recognized working in the driveway again. So somebody said, "Aren't you the duck man?" Yeah, I'm the duck man. Anyway, they had an Aprilia motorcycle. I had some problems with it. Not really my area expertise to be working on something Italian made, so I sent them over to D&D Cycles, which is a local cycle shop that I do a lot of my bike business with. Really, really nice people in there. D&D Cycles in Pensacola. They do Aprilia, Triumph, Ducati, Vespa. I mean, the list goes on and on. Pretty much all things European. The Dink over there, the owner, he knows his bikes, especially when it comes to European. Although they do work on Japanese too. So anyway, there's a commercial for D&D Cycles. Really, really nice people. Check them out. But this here is the spring plate on an IRS Beetle, and this here, of course, is the trailing arm. Now this would go in here, and the 3 bolts would hold it together. Now if you look in these holes, you'll notice the only adjustment you have is forward and back. If I try to move it this way, you immediately block your bolt hole. So there actually is no camber adjustment. And this looks so weird that this adjustment would actually set the camber. But how this works is you're twisting this arm, actually twisting it down its length against the spring plate. And that is effectively what moves the wheel here on the end of the axle in and out. It's not a lot. It's only like, I think a maximum of about 4 degrees in the full adjustment. That's it. That's all it's got. But that's how it's made, is right here. Now what you could do is upgrade to the 944 suspension like I did. Or you could much more simply put, and the reason why I did it was actually to add the 944 brakes on the back here. This hole that you see right here, you can actually square this up. Make it about as tall as it is long. And when you put this in here, you have that ability to adjust your camber. There actually will be a bit of play that you can make in here. Now there will not be a tool or a bolt. The Porsche tool, of course, will not work in here. And, you know, there's no hole for it, but I don't see any reason why you couldn't drill one out. And actually, that's kind of interesting. There actually is a hole there for it already, which is the right size. Technically, if you had the hole here cut, you could set your toe in from this little guy. I didn't even know that. Had I have not had all these tools together, I would not have been able to do that. So anyways, yeah, that right there is kind of interesting. Really interesting that this stuff was so closely, you know, cut and fit and designed by, well, pretty much the same people. This suspension design was actually something that originally, well, just like the swing axle, was designed by Porsche, but later it was modified to be similar to that of the 911. And it allowed them to use the existing hardware that was already there with minor modifications to the Beetle chassis to allow you to upgrade to IRS. Oh, don't mind the fact that this is upside down, by the way. That's your shock tower, which would usually be in the bottom, and your bump stop would normally be on the top. But looking at it this way, I mean, everything still applies. Everything still works the same way. Fucking assholes in the neighborhood today. Let me tell you what, everybody's got to be screaming. Shut up, you fucking fools. So anyway, in conclusion, once we put the body on here, you won't even hardly notice that there's that much negative camber on there. I mean, even if I do lower it a bit and it kicks in a little more, which is actually how it was at the show, you guys didn't even hardly notice that the camber was like that. And the same thing goes with the 350Z. Despite there being as much negative camber as there is, it doesn't look like they're kicked under that far. And I guess the reason is because you can't really compare the wheels to each other. You don't really have much to compare it to at all. The body actually slopes inwards and the wheels slope upwards, so I guess it makes things look even. Kind of interesting to me. So anyways, as always, you guys, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, pluck that little dingle bell you see down there next to the subscribe button. Nobody get updates every time I upload a video. Check out Duckman Cycles VW Garage up on the Facebook group page. Check out my other YouTube channel, VV the Duck VV. Subscribe over there. Also, I have an Instagram at the same name, VV the Duck VV, and if you'd like to email me, duckmancycles@duckshit.net. Thanks a lot, you guys, for watching. Really do appreciate it. More updates to come. We'll talk to you soon.